Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jameson Chase Young and this is Coins in History. I'm standing here with my Benjamin Franklin half dollar 1958 Denver Mint. We'll talk about that second, and I first want to talk about what happened here in small town Nebraska in 1958. It was this year when a young kid slash guy he went on a murder spree named Charles Starkweather. Him and his 14-year-old girlfriend, Caril Fugate, they went on a murder spree, and it's the murder spree that a lot of people say coined the phrase spree killer. Not Charles himself, but the investigators and the media people who were after him. That's kind of where the name spree killer got. It's also the murder spree that inspired a lot of movies like the 1990s Natural Born Killers with Woody Harrelson. It inspired Badlands. I know it's mentioned in the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fires. Charles Starkweather, he was born in Nebraska in 1938. He grew up in Lincoln. He went to Lincoln High School, but he never graduated. He was born with like a disability that kind of like bowed his legs out, plus he had a speech impediment. There's reports that he might have got bullied at first, and then he got a little bit stronger, and there's like reports that getting a little bit stronger just like totally went to his head. And on top of that, like some people say that like if he would, see somebody who was a little bit bigger than him or a little bit better looking than him, he'd just want to fight the guy. So I don't know if he had like a perfect combination of like an inferiority complex and a power high, but it was in 1956 when he was 18 and his girlfriend, Caril Fugate, was only 13 years old. That's when they first met. Their murder spree, by the way, happened when he was 19 and she was 14. Originally, Charles Starkweather drops out of high school and starts working at a newspaper factory. That job didn't last too long. He was reported to being a really horrible worker. From there, he started working as a trash man. The whole relationship between him and Caril Fugate was obviously not good, the 14 and 19. Her parents really didn't like it. His parents didn't like it. Like on one occasion, he was teaching her how to drive and she crashed the car, and Charles Starkweather's family was not that rich, so that was kind of hard, and I think it was that fight that led to Starkweather's dad kicking him out of the house. But anyway, the relationship went on, and the murder spree actually started before the murder spree, meaning you have 10 murders that all happened within a week or two, but 2 months prior to that, in November of 1957, Charles Starkweather robbed a gas station, and he wanted to buy something on credit, and the young man, a young man last name of Culver, wouldn't sell it to him on credit. So that ticked off Charles Starkweather. He came back to rob the place, and he not only robbed it, he took Culver hostage. He took him out to a country road, and there it was. They got it, according to Starkweather. Starkweather was the only witness. They got into an altercation over the gun, and Starkweather killed the Culver kid. That happened in 1957 November, and I think the whole robbery, netted him anywhere from $100 to $150. And then over the course of 2 months, he spent that money, and little by little, it was during these same 2 months that him and, like Caril Fugate's parents were getting into it. Like, obviously, they didn't like their 14-year-old junior high daughter dating a 19-year-old guy. But one day, Starkweather showed up at Caril Fugate's house when, according to her and the evidence, she was still at school. This showing up at her house, some type of argument or fight went down with the Caril Fugate family, and Charles Starkweather ended up coming back to the house, murdering her stepfather, her mother, and her two-year-old half-sister. And here's where things get also really dicey. From there, when Caril Fugate came home, and these two lived in that house for 6 days. Now, Starkweather did stuff the bodies in the back in the chicken coop in the outhouse, so they weren't living there with them. But according to Caril Fugate, she did not know her family was murdered. She said that Starkweather had told her that he had, abducted them and he was holding them at ransom. If you do what I say, they'll be fine. If you don't do what I say, something bad will happen. But they lived in the house for 6 days, where he shot her whole family up, and she, according to her, didn't know anything, according to her. But little by little, as the family was like, their coworkers and their friends and their family was like, where are they? You know, eventually they had to flee the house. Like originally they put up a note saying, I think Caril and Fugate put up a note saying, the whole family's sick with the flu, please stay away. Eventually the grandma came over and she really wanted in the house, and she told Caril and Fugate that, well, I'm going to be calling the police. And it was later on then that Starkweather and Caril and Fugate fled Lincoln for the first time. They'd eventually come back to Lincoln. But when they first fled Lincoln, they went to a small town called Bennett, Nebraska. Charles Starkweather, he had grown up doing some hunting around there, and he knew an older man named August Meyer, guy in his 70s, an old farmer, and they first went to his house, and on their way to his house, their car got stuck. So they went in there and asked him if you know, you could help pull my car out, but instead they murdered him and robbed him, and they got their car stuck again. And from there they took off hitchhiking. Well, not really hitchhiking, but yeah, they took off hitchhiking, where they were picked up by a young teenage couple, Robert Jensen, 17, of Bennett, Nebraska, and Caril King, 16, of Bennett, Nebraska. These were two high school sweethearts just kind of out on a driving date. They picked up Charles Starkweather and Caril Ann Fugate, and it was then that Charles Starkweather abducted them. He brought them to an old storm cellar that was part of a once upon a time abandoned one-room country schoolhouse. He brought them there. He murdered the Jensen boy, and he tried to assault and then murdered the Caril King girl. Then they fled in the Robert Jensen's car, and they originally were going to flee the state. They made it all the way to Hastings, and for whatever reason came back to Lincoln. It was during this time Charles Starkweather, he knew the route of the rich people's houses, because he had been a trash man around there. And he went to the rich neighborhood, and he went to this rich family called the Ward family. When they first came there was just the maid, and they abducted her, took her into custody within the house. They stayed in the house overnight, and they murdered the maid. Then they murdered Mrs. Ward, and then eventually Mr. Ward would come home, and they murdered him too. They burglarized the house of jewelry and valuables, and they stole Mr. and Mrs. Ward's car. And then they finally did flee the state, and they made it to Wyoming. It was during this time that obviously the public scrutiny and pressure and all that was crazy. Like I think people were selling out gun stores and ammunition stores, and like when they first found the old man, that August Meyer's house in Bennett, it wasn't just like dozens and dozens of police officers there, it was dozens and dozens of armed farmers there, and the whole state was in a frenzy, so this was big news. So Charles Starkweather and Caril Ann Fugate, they could read the newspaper clippings and the radio reports about them as they went, and they knew that Mr. Ward's car had been, they found Mr. Ward and the bodies, Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward, and the maid, and so he knew that they had to ditch the car. Not only that, but it was a really nice car, it was a rich person's car, and it was attracting looks. So it was then in Wyoming that they spotted a traveling salesman. They spotted a car on the side of the road, and it happened to be a traveling salesman, a man last name of Collison. Collison, the traveling salesman, was sleeping in his car, and Charles Starkweather wanted him out of the car, and he eventually shot through the window and killed the traveling salesman, Collison. Like Charles Starkweather was struggling with the parking brake. He had never, I guess those were new back in 1958. He had never seen or experienced such a thing. And this passing by motorist stopped. From there, some type of argument or fight, took place. And then a passing by police officer came by. Caril Ann Fugate jumped out of the car, ran towards the police officer, and Charles Starkweather jumped in the traveling salesman car and took off down the road. A high-speed pursuit between the police officer and Charles Starkweather took place, and other police officers were being radioed in and were also on it. And then eventually a bullet went through the Charles Starkweather's car that he was driving, and Charles Starkweather pulled over, this was around Douglas, Wyoming, and turned himself in. From there, the state of Wyoming extradited both him back to Nebraska, him and Caril Ann Fugate. Now, Charles Starkweather, he would get sentenced to death for his actions in it. It only took him 17 months. He committed the crime in early 58 and he was executed in mid 59, so they really didn't mess around back then. But he was executed in 1959 for his part in the crime. Caril Fugate, for her part of the crime, she was only a junior high girl. She originally was sentenced to life in prison, but she was eventually paroled in 1976, where then she eventually from there moved to Michigan and is still alive to this day as of 2025. But yeah, it was these two who, like I said, they inspired a lot of crazy movies. You know, Woody Harrelson's Natural Born Killers and The Badlands. And it was this 1958 Charles Starkweather murder spree that was going on when this Benjamin $50 was being made. Its mass is 12.50. Diameter is 30.6 millimeters. Its thickness is 1.8 millimeters. Its composition is 90% silver, 10% copper. Silver total of 0.36169. I do love the Benjamin $50. I love them. They're actually Franklin $50. I love them because of their simplicity. You know, others like have too much stuff jammed in there and too much like little writing. The Benjamin Franklin is just like, it's so simple but yet so good. And the one woman who helped design the coin, she loved Benjamin Franklin. She wanted him on the front and she wanted the Liberty Bell. Let's see if I can get that in there. She wanted the Liberty Bell on the back. The problem with that, there was a rule, you had to have an eagle on the back. So you can see off to the side of the Liberty Bell that there's a little tiny eagle. That was to match the rules of the time that the $50 had to have the eagle on the back. And these things, these Franklin $50, they're the last $50 to have a full run in silver. Like these, they went from 1948 to 1963. Now the Kennedy $50 1964, it was 90% silver. And then the Kennedy $50 from 65 up until about 70, they were 40% silver. Then after 70, all the coins stopped being silver. But this is the last $50 to have a full run of 90% silver. So it's a special coin. Total mintage of the 1958 Franklin $50 across all mints was approximately 28,839,974. 4,042,000 of these came from the Philadelphia mint. This one, the Denver mint, it was 23,962,412. And anyway, it was in 1958 when Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate went on their horrible murder spree. It was in 1958 when this amazing Franklin $50 was being minted. And it's a very amazing time period in history, a very interesting yet horrible event. And anyway, my name's Jameson Chase Young, and this is Coins in History. If you enjoy these videos, please like the video and please subscribe to the channel Coins in History. Thank you for watching. Thank you.